us, I believe you're going to be interested. And just to inform members that this is a recorded training, and I believe that is okay with all us all. So I believe you can see the course outline. It kicked me out, but I managed myself back. You can hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you. Kindly, let's continue with the course outline. And as highlighted, we have 9 areas that we want to interact on. And the first area is on the data-driven. And this is our role in HR and how we use this data in terms of operation and strategic decisions. Also, we look at how do we analyze this data and the metrics that we can embrace as HR. There's also the issue of how to use the data and its measurement system, how to align this data to the organization goals, because at the end of the day, the data that we're interacting with, the end goal is how do we support our organization. Also, there's some mistakes that come up, especially in analyzing data. And like we all agree in HR, we're not very strong in data. So there's some of the mistakes that normally we'll make. So we're going to interact so that in future, after this training, when you present your data, then you avoid some of these mistakes. We're also going to have a look at the types of performance measures, the key performance indicators, their relevance, and how we can be able to determine them, purposeful measurements. And finally, we are going to identify organization KPIs, and we're going to have an example so that tomorrow when you go back or in future when you want to use the skills that you have learned from this training, then you can have an example that you can be able to always refer to. So with no further ado, I'll go to the first outline that we are going to discuss. And for me, I'm looking for an interactive. And I will request, in case you have any question, in case I'm too fast, just feel free to unmute and tell me. Secondly, in case you have a question, you can always put it on the chat. Otherwise, we'll have the Q&A sessions after the training. Thank you. Thank you, Harriet, for confirming that you can hear me. So we now go to the first session. And this is a data-driven and our role as HR in these operations and strategic decisions, because we believe, you agree with me that all organizations are headed towards a specific strategic direction. So I think our HR people, it's time we paused back and appreciated that it's time for big data. And like I said earlier, HR people have always assumed we don't know how to utilize data. There are challenges, and at times we don't know how to bring forward.
Molly,
Yes, please.
are you sharing the presentation?
Yes, I am. It's not been. I am sharing.
Can everyone confirm that they're able to see the presentation?
I see the presentation. I
I
can
can
see.
see.
Okay. Maureen, continue. Sorry for that.
No worries. Thank you so much. It's always good to clarify and to be sure. Otherwise, maybe at times he shares on one side and doesn't share on the other side. So thanks for members for confirming that you can actually see my screen. So like I was saying, it's time for analyzing data as HR people, because one of the things is that it brings a lot of clarity on issues that we are able to drive. And this clarity enables us when you're making decisions, and there's nothing good like when you're making a decision and you have evidence. So one of the key things about HR analytics and data is that it gives us a tool, it gives us a way of being able to make evidence-based decisions. And it also helps us as we're making the decisions, at the end of the day, we're able to move towards the organization goals. The other issue or the other thing is that it also helps us in making an impact in the business. As you all know, in the past, people have always said that HR is for hiring and firing. That used to be the norm in the past. However, if you do embrace the HR metrics, then you'll see the impact of the human capital in the business. That's why it's very important for us to appreciate and to understand the data. And we're told that one of the best ways to find out how to become more strategic is to analyze your data. Yeah. And once you do that, then people, even other functions, will get to appreciate what you're doing, because you sit on that table, you're able to give information based not only on theoretical or on write-ups, but you also support it with the data. Further, we're told that functions like finance, IT, business development, which are very key in terms of the success of any organization. So when you embrace data, you're able to show in monetary terms how their actions directly impact the strategic business goals. And as we interact in this training, you're going to see how we can be able to use what metrics can we be able to show and present to the management, and they're able to see what this specific function is doing, what we as HR we are doing to the business, and the impact that we are giving to the business. Yeah. And that can only be achieved when we embrace a data-driven culture in our HR functions. And what is the benefits? Once we have this data-driven, when we shift ourselves from HR, from the norm for the normal write-ups that we make, and now we embrace data, how do we stand to benefit? One is that this data or this analytics will allow us as HR and our functions to show where and how much we directly impact the strategic business goals. And you'll agree with me, in most organizations you find lately, in the past, you never find anybody from HR in the boardrooms. But now they have seen there's a relevance of having people in HR in those boardrooms. So how do you make yourself relevant in that boardroom? By providing HR metrics and showing how we are impacting the business. If this is a direction that we're headed to, look for a metric that can be able to show you, that can be able to sell your case, that can be able to sell your report and support your report by giving evidence-based examples that shows that for real, this is where we are headed. Okay. It also helps us in identify the factors that directly increase productivity through data, and we are told data does not lie. So if you're able to project your data, prepare your data in such a way that you're able to show, by the way, if we do this and not this, this is going to increase the productivity. And you're able to argue your case, maybe with percentages, with ratios, So, and you're able to show, by the way, this is what is, and you'd be surprised. Most people want to hear good things. So when you're able to present that and project that, then it really gives you a lot of mileage. And it's also a very great benefit. The other thing is it also helps in improving the development and training processes, because you're able to increase the speed and adaptability of the current workers. How do you do that? Using metrics, you're able to tell, once you take people for training, once you invest, do you have any return on investments? Or you just take people for training and that's it. So as a HR person, the challenge I'm putting to you today is, when you invest in some specific training, how do you measure that impact? Okay. As HR, data is going to help us to demonstrate that we can increase the organization speed and therefore decrease products time to market, and everybody will recognize us as a corporate leader. How does it relate with us as HR people? When you're in these meetings and you have your data, everybody is talking about data, and there you are talking about data on people. And like we all know, HR is the engine of any organization. The moment you're able to sell your people, the moment you're able to sell that HR asset, the human, and people get to appreciate who you are, and they get to start even giving HR the respect that it actually deserves in any organization. It can also help us increase our contribution in critical area by designing recruitment systems that effectively attract the best innovators. Why? Because we have data to show. We're able to tell ourselves, these are the people that we recruited. This is a cost of hire, And as we interact with this, you're going to see the kind of metrics that we can be able to embrace, so that when we sit on those tables, when we present our reports, then it is a report that the data is speaking for itself. We continue on the benefits. It also allows us as HR to be more effective as we are influencing managers. We are told, as a good leader, one of the things that you need to have is the ability to influence other people, ability to influence decisions, ability to even influence the team that you're working with. So when you have a data-driven HR, then it becomes very easy for you to influence other people, because it's not just about talking, you're giving them data. And like I said earlier, data does not lie. Okay. The other benefit, the seventh benefit, is that it prepares managers and HR for the future, because you're able to make a data-driven decision making and you're able to predict trends and upcoming problems, opportunities in the management. And how do you achieve this? Assume you're having a metrics on your population of your employees. You have your HR policy, the retirement age. So can we be able to know this, like 80% or 50% or 20% of our staff will be retiring maybe the next 1 or 2, 3, 4 years. So how do you make a decision? Yeah, you can be able to predict, like now we know we are working with the generation. We have the millennials, we have the alphas. In any working population, you find you have like 5 generations in the same organization. So how do you predict? Some of these generations are very easy to predict. You can tell. Like now we know most of the millennials, for them, they don't want to remain in a job for a long time. So you can always tell yourself that if I have this, assume like 80% of my staff are millennials, you can predict that in the future, I'll have I will need to get some people in. So how do you plan? So it helps you predict the trends and any upcoming problems that you may foresee. And of course, those are opportunities to be able to prepare well and have a very good business continuity HR plan. It also helps us as HR leaders to be more accurate in our HR budget. I know until recently, and I believe most of you can agree with me, HR, even for some of us in HR, preparing a budget was a big, big, big challenge. You need to go to the finance people because they want to, and now, of course, the finance people, they're very good at cutting our budget, But with a data-driven HR, you can easily allocate. You'll be able to know this budget line, those terminologies that they use in finance. You're able to articulate those terminologies. You're able to allocate your budget lines accordingly. And this will enable you to have a maximum impact on the staff. And of course, this translates to the organization and supporting the organization goals. The other benefit is that with its own ROI ratio, this is return on investment, we're able to compare the effectiveness of programs against those in competing functions like finance, marketing, and IT. I'm sure most of you have heard where they're saying you're a call center, you don't bring any business, but with data, you're able to show I may not be bringing any cash to the organization, but whatever I am doing, this is the percentage, this is the ratio that it's bringing back to the investments that the stakeholders put in place. But without data that you can show, then you continue being These are cost center, they only manage costs, you get. But if you have a data-driven HR culture, then you're able to challenge some of these decisions. Even during budgeting, when you allocated a few, maybe the percentage, you're able to challenge it by giving their return on investment ratios, okay? Number 10 is that it will help us identify the hidden causes of problems. And how this helps is that you're able, by having the right metrics, because you'll see, I'll give you a few metrics that are there, and some of them are able to show you what problems we have. Let's say, like now, if it's the retention or the staff turnover, maybe you've never thought of, maybe I need to know my turnover percentage. But the moment you start driving that data, the moment you start generating that data, then you ask yourself, wow, why is this percentage either going up or going down? If it's going down, it's a positive thing. You'd be happy. You're like, maybe your retention strategies are working. But if you realize that your staff turnover tends to be getting to the negative, then you're like, maybe there's a problem. So it gives you a red flag. So they help us in trying to identify hidden causes of problems, okay? The other thing that is number 11 is data will increase hiring and recruiting efficiency, because you're able to project yourself in terms of data. You're able to provide data. Let's say maybe the cost of hiring, and you're telling people, you know what, do you know what it takes to hire one person? And people who believe that if somebody makes a mistake, they have to go, they'll be like, wow, it's really expensive to have a whole management, maybe like 3 or 4 people sitting to interview. So it really helps in trying to sell the agenda that you may have. So how do we analyze this data? And what are the trends? Because this is what now that will help us. When you sit in your office and you want to generate HR metrics, how do you analyze it? So in this session, this is what we're going to go through. And first, we need to understand what are HR metrics. I'm sure when you realize or when you saw this training, maybe the question that maybe came to your mind is like, people talk about HR metrics. What is HR metrics? Yeah. And as defined there, HR metrics, allow me to read so that we can internalize it. HR metrics or human resource metrics are key performance indicators that quantify how well an organization or a company is optimizing their human capital. Okay? How well company is optimizing their human capital. This is analyzed in the context of overall business performance. So you cannot dislink the data from the business performance. We are further told that tracking HR metrics provides actionable data so you can make better decisions. So at the end of the day, we want to have data that helps us to make better decisions. We further told that human resource teams can track metrics for all HR functions, including hiring, compensation, training, engagement, and retention. What this says is that all these, which are the key HR functions, you can be able to generate metrics from it. Yeah. If it is your hiring, there's a metric that you can be able to develop from that. If it's compensation and benefits, you can be able to drive some metrics. If it's training, if it's engagement, if it's retention. So we're saying that HR metrics are this data that quantifies how well the company is optimizing its human capital. If it's hiring, how well are you optimizing? If it's compensation, how well is it being optimized? And for us to internalize and understand it better is to give us an example of matrices. And this is just an example. The metrics are many. And you can develop, anything that you can, whatever data you have, you can generate a matrix out of it. But these are just example for us to open up ourselves and ask ourselves, and if I start, in case you don't embrace the HR data, you can start with this for you to be able to start driving it. So the first is employee turnover rate. And as we continue the presentation, I'll be able to show you how you can be able to calculate some of these matrices. So the first one is the employee rate over turn. turnover rate. And this is whereby you're trying to measure how much, what is the rate, what is the turnover of your employees? Do you listen so many people within a year, you know? How is it? Then the reverse of that is the employee retention rate. How much are you being able to retain your people? And if you're retaining your people, how much? Because every HR person, it's one of our success factor when you're able to retain your staff. So how is the rate? Because some people will be saying, by the way, if you ask, what is one of your success factor? What did you do? They're like, well, I was able to manage the employee retention rate. And somebody will ask you, so what was the rate? You have no idea. But if you're able to tell people, I was able to reduce my staff retention rate, I mean, to improve my staff retention rate from, let's say, for illustration's sake, from 10% to 30%, 40%. That is a very clear key performance success, you know. Engagement rate. How are staff engaged in your organization? Do they feel like they're part of it? And how do you get it? How do you get this? This is a new thing. This is an emerging issue in HR, staff engagement, and I know most of us are really embracing it. How engaged are your staff? Are your staff your key ambassadors of your organizations? Or are they the ones that when things go wrong, they'll be the first to say, okay, don't even think about it, you know? But how do you determine that? Is only by having a percentage or a rate or a metric that is able to inform you that. Employee net promoter score, also very closely aligned to the engagement rate. This is whereby how much do your employees promote you? You ask and you'll ask them, maybe you'll be having a rating from 1 to 10, and a question will be like, in case somebody asks, would you recommend them to come and work for organization 1, 2, 3? Maybe most of them will say, no, I wouldn't, you know. So that gives you that score. Absenteeism rate. You cannot ignore it. Yeah. You realize maybe your staff every week, the level of sick offs is so high. That is a problem. But for you to only know there's a problem, you need to have data that will show you that. Training effectiveness. What is the impact? When you take people for training, you have a very huge budget for training. How are you able to measure that for real there's some effectiveness in managing that training? And the only way maybe you can be able to do is that, do you have a measure that will start before the training and after the training? And you're able to say, if it is like our customer service, assume it's a customer service training. Before we did our training, our customer service index was at this level. But after the training, wow, our customer service index has increased. So you have to have a way of showing how it's effective. Maybe somebody was not able to do something, but it has to be measurable. New hire performance. When somebody comes in, of course, you know, there's a period where they have to be inducted. They have to understand the systems. But after that, how are they performing? And you may realize maybe you're having very good people, new hires, but within 6 months, they've gone. Yeah. Cost per hire. Are you able to confidently tell your management that this is a cost per hire? Therefore, when you're trying to sell your retention strategy, you're telling them, by the way, if you don't do this, then this is how much your company is incurring by us hiring. Internal mobility rate, yeah, cost per hire per employee. There's a general one, and there's per employee per individual, the whole staff. HR tech, return on investments. I know right now, most people have gone to the HR and find almost every organization has a HR system. But are you able to show its rate of return? If somebody was to ask you, what benefit has this HR system coming? It's costing so much. Maybe you're at that point where you're renewing your annual license and they're asking you, I really don't feel that we need to renew this license because I don't see its relevance. Are you able, do you have a metric that will be able to show, since we implemented this HR system, there is this percentage return on investments? Maybe the effectiveness has improved, the turnaround time maybe for recruitment, because maybe now recruitment, you do it online. If it's leave management, you do it online. So the turnaround is very fast because you can apply for leave within a day and the next day you have. In most organizations, maybe because now you have a system, you've had to even reallocate other duties. So the staff, you know, the number of staff that you have in your organization or in your HR functions, they have reduced. So how are you able to show that? But you can only be able to show that by having a metric in place. Of course, the HR tech user adoption rate, like I said, in this time and era, most of us are working with a population of almost 4 or 5 generations. And do you agree with me? There's a generation that is HR tech. There's a generation that they don't believe in technology. Are you able to show that? But you're saying, by the way, since we implemented this system, it seems this percentage are adapting to this and this kind of things. So like you can see from this, these are just a few of the metrics that we can embrace, but you can be able to develop a metric for each and every HR function that you are undertaking. So once we get those data, once we get the metrics, all these metrics, all these metrics, you have them. And you've been able to have, you have a very good employee turnover rate, you have a very good absenteeism rate, you have a very good new high performance, all these metrics. How do you use them? Do you just keep them? Do you just embrace them? Or how do you use them so that they're effective and they add value to the organization? So first is that we are told tracking HR metrics is pointless if you don't rubric them to enable make decisions. So we are told you can have a very good metric, but if you don't use it, if you don't give it out to the management to make a decision, then it is of no use. You'll have put so much energy in developing the metrics, but if you don't sell it out, if you don't give it out to the relevant people, then it becomes irrelevant. So make sure whatever metric that you generate is a metric that will help you make decision, is a metric that will help you support your agenda, whatever agenda you want to sell to the management. And here is a basic process of using HR metrics. 1, capture data about your workforce. In HR, we are called HR because we manage the human capital. So we think about people, we are people. So your data has to be about the workforce, and the workforce is a people. Analyze that data. Make changes to improve operations. Having data is one thing, but is it adding value? Is it helping improve in the spirit of continuous improvement? Is it helping? Assess whether the changes were effective. Once you recommend the changes, it is important that we assess that and ensure that these changes are actually effective. And how do you do that? You also need to measure to ensure that for real, it is effective. Then we adjust as necessary. Using the metrics is especially important when your company has to make change. Perhaps you just opened a new location or started offering a new product. So, but how can you tell that it's actually adding value? It's actually returning value to the organization. You can use the metrics to be able to show that. And we're told that these events require adjustments in how you manage employees. If you develop one metric, don't die and you're like, this is a metric I will live for forever, amen. You always need to adjust it based on the circumstances, based on the various variables that may have been used in developing that data. And as we measure its effectiveness, there are things that we need to ask ourselves, because this is what is going to help us ensure that the data that we present, the data that we generate is of value, not only to us, but to the people that who are going to interrogate that data and the people that we intend to use that data. So one is that we ensure the effective use of resources. Yeah. An organization is managed by resources. And by measuring our HR effectiveness, you'll get an indication of how effectively you're using your resources. And in most cases, it will be time versus money. Because any investor has invested, and that is money. Any stakeholder has invested, and that is money. And money versus time, that is something in terms of effectiveness of any business strategic direction you cannot ignore. So we need to discover effectiveness that inefficiencies enables you to improve this or eliminate them. So by data, you're able to ask yourself, are there some inefficiencies? Are there some processes that maybe are not adding value to organizations? Yeah. And be able to put the right mechanisms in place. Another reason why we need to measure our HR effectiveness is workforce and budget planning. Like I said earlier, as HR people in the past, we've really been challenged on data, especially when it comes to budget planning, and you'll find that your budget has been slashed almost to nothing, So we need to understand how effective HR is in our organizations. Because this way, you'll have to track and analyze various metrics. You get. So for you to be able to know your effectiveness, it is up from tracking and analyzing the various metrics that we have in place. These metrics will help you to plan your workforce, and we look in the future and take steps to plan your strategy and budget accordingly. And this is very important, especially I know in most organizations now, they're having people we are calling the business partners. You're a HR person, but you're a business partner because now they've appreciated. But if you're a business partner and you don't understand metrics, because maybe they're opening a new branch or they're opening a new center and they require you to go and give them guidance, advisory as a business partner. So this is a time for you to embrace HR metrics because the only way you're going to be able to put your agenda, the only way you're going to be able to plan your workforce is because you understand the metrics. And you'll be able to sit on that table, you'll be able to budget because as they're opening a new function or a new branch, there'll be a lot of budgeting. So you need to ensure that as a HR person, you've put in place mechanisms, you've been able to track, and you're able to ensure that whatever you put on the table is effective for the workforce and the budget. And do not go to the implementation and like, oh my goodness, I think I forgot this. And you cannot afford to say that. And that's why we are here today trying to ask ourselves, what can we do to ensure that our HR metrics are very effective and they do add value to the organization. We also need to understand the overall impact of HR. You as a HR person, do you know your impact to this organization? Or you only feel your impact is felt when people, maybe they come, they want HR services. But with good metrics, you're able to measure your effectiveness and you're able to demonstrate how you're adding value, not only to you, but to the organization, and how this department is very important, and how that, and trying to show that the organization does and really needs to have HR in place. And as I get to aligning metrics to organization goals, I want to pause and ask, anyone is free to answer. And maybe anyone who has, from what we've discussed regarding the data-driven, how we analyze data, and how we use the data to measure our HR effectiveness. Is anybody who would want to give us an experience of how they have been generating data and how it has helped them, maybe in achieving a HR agenda that they had? I open it up to the floor. Anybody is free. Just unmute yourself and tell us if this, times they say experience is the best teacher. Anyone who'd want to share something on data and HR metrics, you're free. You can unmute or you can put on the chat. Anyone, please, who'd want to share with us?
On my part, the data that I have been compiling actually is as a result of compliance. Like we have to report the composition of our staff and regarding the gender, the ethnicities, the PWDs, in whatever category, whatever the number of card that exist. And also that is by Public Service Commission Performance Evaluation Unit. And also during I'm also in a Energy Sector Gender Committee. They also require sex disaggregated data. And so we are supposed to provide that in terms of how many staff are in the core mandate. That means pursued the STEM subjects, have come up to be engineers. And where they have not, we've made a deliberate effort through that data, what the data has revealed, in terms of those who are sponsoring issues of gender, to bridge the gaps. So yeah, we've done that, provided that data. We've realized this is where it is a little bit below the requirement. Then we start working on now the mentorship, the coaching, the career fairs, the gender budgeting, a lot of issues to bridge the gaps. And also, I work with most professional bodies, so I know how many of our engineers, what budget goes where in terms of being in good standing. Also in human resource services, we know how much do we spend on maybe club subscription and such. It requires the data analytics.
Thank you so much for that sharing. And you agree, and I love it when you say, especially on the gender, you're able to see this is where the gap is. So like we're saying, it helps you identify the gap. And I'm sure if you didn't have that data, then you cannot be able to know there's a gap. You just be assuming that everything is normal. And so you started by saying that most of the data that you present are compliance data. And these are the data that are required. And I always challenge HR because I realize most of us are very good at presenting this compliance because you're like, you have a deadline, you have to make a return. But imagine, and you realize as you're making the compliance data, you also pick issues that you didn't know. So imagine if you made it a practice that even before I wait for the compliance, I'm already developing my data. You can imagine how beautiful it is when you're there seated and you're showing data and you're saying, wow, this is where I am in terms of the gender. This is how I am in terms of the budget. And like you well articulated that when you're working with the NGOs, there's this element of budgeting, there's this, and it's all about data. So I tell people when you hear about HR metrics, some people are like, wow, this thing is so complicated. But it is not complicated. They're the things that we do every day. It's only that now you find out this is more structured. So thank you so much for that sharing. I appreciate. Is anybody else who'd also want to share with us anything? Anyone else? Thanks for that. I really appreciate. Anyone else who feels they want to share something? Just unmute and say something. Yeah. Then with that, we can go on with our presentation. So we go to our fourth, I think is our fourth on our outline. This is where we are aligning metrics to organization goals. And allow me to start from where we had left, whereby we know metrics they should help us and they should be aligned to the organization. Because as HR, you're there to you're driving the people agenda towards a strategic decision. So like you can see, our responsibility as you develop these metrics do you support the overall organization, or you just present your metrics and they remain in HR? We also reminded that for us to be able to ensure that we align, we have to establish HR metrics as a key part of proper management and support. So it is supposed to be part of us, I know like most organizations have the monthly HR report, and you find in most cases you just be maybe like a 1 or 3 paragraphs or depending, and you find in the whole HR report there is no single metrics. So we are being encouraged that for us to be able to align them, we need to ensure that we have proper management support and we have metrics that we've established in our functions that support the organization goals. And we're told in the first step of establishing a HR matrix is knowing what the overall organization goals are. And how do you get to know that? One, most organizations nowadays have a strategic plan. And I always tell people, even where there is no document that is saying this is a strategic plan for this organization for the period of 20 this to 20 that, there are always some other quiet strategic plans that are not documented. Because if an organization is operating, then there's something they want to achieve. It's only that maybe it is small, they've not gotten a strategic plan. So strategic plan documents can help you establish the relevant HR metrics, the documents, the discussions that you're having with the organization when you have your management meeting, the organization stakeholders, in other areas of the organization, the executives, your team members from different functions, from finance. Maybe the finance, there's something they ask you want some money and they're asking you some questions. You can be able to establish a metric that you will give to finance, and whatever question they're going to ask in future, they're not going to ask it. And we are told that once the organization goals and the HR support of these goals are determined, then metrics can be established. So that you don't just have metrics and you put so much effort in developing this metric, then you realize there's no need for this metric. That's why it's important for you to ensure that whatever metric that you're coming up with, whatever metrics that you want to put forward is aligned to the business organization goals. Yeah. So we continue. And one of the things, this is an example, I talked about the customer satisfaction score. And allow me to give this example, like in case you undertake a customer care training on your staff, maybe in the service industry. I always encourage that if you're going to undertake a customer service training, first have a survey on the customers, so that when you undertake the training, you can be able to show before the training, this is where we are. After the training, this is the score that we have obtained. And that way, it helps you to link, because you'll be able to tell your management that, you see, I invested in this customer care training, and look at our average customer satisfaction score has improved. It was at 80. It is now at 90. It is at 99. There's a way you're able to show that you're not just doing training for the sake of training. You're doing training because at the end of the day, you want to align it to the organization goals. After the linkage of the HR metrics to the organizational goal, you have to ensure that you set quantifiable targets for each metric. Quantifiable. Because otherwise, it will not have value. Otherwise, even for you to interpret it will be a big challenge. And then we're told that these targets can again be determined through discussions with stakeholders, with the management, and any historical data that may be available in HR. Let's say, like, maybe we're looking at the HR turnover. We can use the historical data. We can say in 2021, this was the HR turnover, this was the employee turnover. In 2022, it's historical, but it's able to enable you make a decision in current. It enables you to build on your data. And you see, especially when you give trends, people are able to see, wow, this is what is happening. And maybe it goes up or down, maybe able to ask yourself, like, I know most people during the COVID era, people who've embraced the HR-driven function, you'd realize maybe during the COVID, the graph would be, low or something. Then somebody is able to ask, why do we have that dip? And automatically people say it's because this was the COVID area. So it's very, very important that you ensure that the targets that you have are very quantifiable. And when relevant, you can use historical data. We also reminded that the quantifiable targets from the HR KPIs are incorporated in the organization operation plans in the HR department and cascaded to the HR team. You as a HR lead don't have these wonderful metrics that you're working on and you've not involved in other people. It's supposed to be a wholesome. Everybody, because each person, we are told your output should be somebody else's input. So whatever you're doing, has to be in alignment with the HR team, has to be in alignment with the department, has to be in alignment with the operations, and has to be in alignment with the main organization goal. So you're able to cascade them and show this is how I'm contributing to the main organization goal. And like most of organizations that have embraced the performance management that is online, you realize you're able to drive metrics. And at the end of the day, the top goal, assume you had one specific goal, you're able to really generate and know this is how we are performing. Yet it has come from the person at the lower level of the organization. So that is how we ensure that we align them so that it is one sum. It is a metric that talks to us, that talks to our organization. So when you're analyzing data, I'm sure there's some common mistakes that come up. And allow me, I hope we can be able to interact on this. Who can just tell me, like I say in adult learning, there's no wrong answer. All answers are correct because it depends on how you're looking at it. So I want to ask, what are these mistakes that can come up when we're analyzing data? And I open it up to all of us. Anybody who has a common mistake, and there's no wrong answer, all answers are correct. So what are these common mistakes that we can have or we normally make as we're trying to analyze our data? I open it up. Kindly just unmute yourself, or you can put it on the chat. Anyone who want to try? Harriet? Is Harriet in the house? Or Doreen? Or anyone who has something they want to share on the common mistakes that we may make while we're analyzing data? Joshua, you want to say something? I can see there's some movement on your... Anyone who don't? Okay. Yeah. Thank you. So allow me now to just take you through the common mistakes that we may make or common mistakes that people make when we are analyzing the data. And I have like 7 mistakes that I will take us through. And these are the common mistakes that we need to avoid when we're using workforce analytics. So the first is using dirty data. I'm sure most of us have had the notion of we say garbage in, garbage out. So this does not stop, and it's on all data. So even for HR metrics, if you use dirty data, if you use data that is not right, then you can be assured that the end result will be, and I don't use to be a garbage data, but I wanted to say that when you use dirty data, then you can be assured that even the direction that you're going to push or the data that you're going to, or the metric that you're going to come up with will also be, in quotes, not very effective. Experiencing data overwhelm. What is this? At times, I'm sure you've seen some reports that have so much data that you don't even know how to interpret it. You put so much, you put the age, you put this, and it's looking so crowded. So it is always encouraged when you're preparing your data, ensure that it's very specific, it's not overwhelmed, it is simple, and you can easily be able to interact with it. And you're told you can even start from one data, you start small and build from there. As opposed to having a data that has so much and you're not able to interact it, and it becomes a bother or a challenge to the person who's trying to interpret it. And especially whereby the times, like reports, you provide the report, you give the report, then people go through it. So if it is so overwhelming, somebody's like, so now what do I do with all this? And most of the times what they'll do, they just pack it. They not read it, So it's good to try and avoid and put so much into a metric, focusing on the wrong areas. we're told it is very important as you're preparing your data to ensure that you have the main pain points in your organization, the main pain points that your organization is experiencing. If something, an organization had a challenge in 2014 or 2013, that is 10 years ago. Presenting a data that is 10 years, that was generated 10 years ago, you really feel that you'll be focusing in the wrong areas because so much has changed over that period, and you'll be focusing on the wrong areas. So it's very important that to ensure that when you're generating your data, you're specific and you know where you're looking for that data, and may it be the right place, and ensure that it has an impact. Okay. The other area of the other mistakes that normally we need to avoid is focusing on the past and not on the future. Well, you may not fully ignore the past because maybe you need to know where you're coming from. But like I said, you go to 2014, we're in 2023, and maybe the area that you're reporting on, assume like now, maybe you're reporting on something like return on investment. Maybe what you do, you're paid in dollars, or how you quit. The cost of a shilling, maybe like 10 or 20 years back, and the cost of a shilling now, so much has changed. So you see, if you focus so much on the past, then whatever you'll give will not have a positive outcome and may not be able to answer the challenge that you have, or whatever you want to sell, the agenda that you have that you don't want to sell to the management. Was not putting insights into action, yeah, whereby you projected your data, you know what needs to be done, but you're just there, and you're like, okay, so what next, So we need to put insights. We need to show that, yes, this is what is happening, and this is the action plan. This is where we this is where we need to be. You need to be proactive. You give data that maybe has a lot of red, and you asked maybe in a meeting, so what are you planning to do with that rate? And you're like, oh, I haven't thought about it. Maybe give me like 2 days, I can be able to give you feedback, And people will be like, are you really going to generate that data? So it's very important that we are proactive and we start taking a proactive approach rather than a reactive approach in everything that we do, and especially when we're providing this data. Other potential mistakes in this data analysis: one, biasing. This occurs when a non-representative sample is used. I like what our gentleman gave us and told us about the gender. They look at the gender, they look at the sex, they look at this, very objective. When you assume you're supposed to give a compliance data and you just look on the gender, you forget there is maybe female and male. You just pick on one, you're biased. Because you want to show how maybe the girl child and the boy child, so you decide, I'm going to ignore one element. So that is bias sampling. Or you decide maybe you have 3 functions, HR, IT, and finance. And during finance, there are so many, let's say, ladies. So you decide, since I want to sell this agenda, I'm going to use finance, So that is bias sampling. You need to be very, very objective. Cherry picking, this happens when data is stacked to support a particular hypothesis. This is what I want to achieve. Like I said, you pick finance. And since I want to show how our recruitment level, we have less men than men, or, vice versa, or the generation, I go to finance, knowing that if I go to finance, whatever I want to sell to the management, it is going to be exact. It will going to show how red we are, Disclosing metrics is also another problem because we need to know its value. Yeah. Because you cannot just have metrics for the sake of having metrics. And you agree with me, times when the metrics becomes useless, and nobody really appreciates it, what happens? You'll be there just talking to yourself, and people are like, gosh, this metric is so outdated, overfitting. This tends to happen during the analysis process, whereby somebody, for example, assume the curve produced by the model seems to be very perfect, and you can see that this curve has been created because the data fits the model. Therefore, the failure of the model may become apparent. However, when the model is compared to future observations, they're not so well fitted. When you say about hooked data, because you're like, you want it to fit a specific model. Yes, it fits, you present it, but and to you, there are people who are very good at interpreting that. When they try to interrogate it, they're like, this one, I think it was done with the end in mind. So it's these are some of the mistakes that we normally have, and the potential mistakes that when you're presenting your data, when you're analyzing your data, that they can come up. So by you getting to understand, it will help you when you're presenting or developing or generating your matrices, you're sure that these problems are not with your reports or the data that you're going to present. We continue with other potential mistakes, focusing only on the numbers. For example, using social biases induced by using data. The numbers may look clean and neat, but the underlying may be socially and economically turbulent. You agree with me? At times, we only look at this, but you don't look at the other side, because you're told any data needs to be interpreted. These numbers, why these numbers? Why X and not Y? Yeah. So don't just focus on X and you're like, yes, it is 10%. But why is it 10%? What is interpretation? The solution bias, this is whereby it can be thought of to be a gentler cousin of cherry picking, whereby you already know where you want, you already know the solution. But however, the solution may be wrong, because since you know you want to go to X, you ensure that 1 + 1 is equals to X. Yeah. So let's not be solution biased. Let's use these metrics to help us make evidence-based decisions. It should help you get the solution. You should not drive the solution or drive the data from the solution, okay? Communicating poorly. This is another key mistake that happens, whereby you can produce the analysis, but when it comes to presenting that data, you're not able to articulate. You're not able to engage. And I'm sure you've had, especially for people who are in the academia, maybe somebody is making a presentation and they've done their data research and the data collection, and maybe someone has done it for them. And when they're told to even interpret a simple graph, they can't. So of course, people will be like, this data, are you the one who really generated it? So as you're generating your data, as you're generating your analysis, ensure you can be able to communicate it. When somebody looks at it, whatever question they ask, you understand. If you decide to put a bar graph and not just a normal pie chart, you need to understand that pie chart. In case somebody is asking, why did you put a line graph? I thought this would make more sense if you presented it. You should be able to answer, no, you pick the pie chart because of this and this and this. But the moment you're like, okay, by the way, maybe, of course, they also start losing trust in your analysis. So ensure that whatever data you present, whatever metrics you present is a metric you can be able to present with a lot of confidence, with no fear of contradiction. So what are these types of measures? Because like for you to be able, we've told you don't want data that does not communicate. We don't want data that does not add value to us. You don't want data that just goes and people are like, these are just a waste of time, How can you be able to do it? So at least we're able to ensure that whatever metrics we are going to generate are metrics that add value to the organization. So one, this is whereby we have one of a measure, performance measure, that we can embrace as HR, and it's called Employee Net Promoter Score. This is something I've spoken about earlier. And if we were having a one-on-one training, then we'd be able to do this now and calculate and see. And the challenge I'm giving to all of us today is that sit down and ask yourself, if tomorrow somebody was to ask me, what is my ENPS? Do I even understand what it is? So this is one of the metrics. And I tell people, when you learn some of these metrics, these are good things. When you go to that meeting, like, oh, by the way, I think today I want to present my ENPS. Everybody looks at you like, oh, what is that? You know, and you're like, oh, I wanted to talk about the employee net promoter score. If they also feel like, wow, the HR person we have, they know what they're doing. Okay. So how do you measure this? So this is a metric that allows you to measure how likely your employees are to recommend your organization to others as a great place of work. I know we know part of recruitment is whereby there's a referral. And you'll be surprised. I know you've gone to some organization and you realize it's like the cousins, the brothers, people from the same village are working in the same area. Because these people, when there's a vacancy, they refer other people. But have you ever thought of asking yourself, if people were to be asked, if there was to be an open check-in, like bring people, promote, and everybody to bring like three, how many people would comfortably promote your organization? So the question that, in case you want to get to know your ENPS score, you'll ask, how likely are you to recommend our company X as a place of work, as a place to work? Then the employees, we rate on a score from 0 to 10. So anybody who rates between 9 and 10 is a promoter, whereby they're saying they're happy and motivated to come and work in that organization. We have the 7 to 8, these are called passives. And these employees who are content, yeah, it's like, oh yeah, let me just, before I get somewhere else, I'm good, you know. But they're not very passionate about this organization. Then 0 to 6, these are the detractors, and these are dissatisfied employees. So once you have that question, and this is what people you're asking, 9 to 10, 7 to 8, 0 to 6. We have the promoters, the passives, and the detractors. So how do you calculate your ENPS? So what will happen is, once all the employees have responded, and nowadays we have very easy ways of doing, we have the Google Forms. So you look at the overall percentage. Then you subtract the percentage of detractors from the promoters. So detractors are the dissatisfied employees. Promoters are the happy and motivated employees. So for example, let's just have an example. A company has 75% promoters and 20% detractors. So we can say our EPS score is 55. Yeah. And in general, as a ratio, we are told a good score is any that is between 10 and 30. While anything over 30 is considered to be excellent. So if your ENPS score is over 30, then you can comfortably say, wow, our staff are motivated. And the question you'll ask yourself, in case it's low, what can you do? And now this is where, if you want to sell your staff engagement strategy. So this is where you come in and tell them, but then you see, for us to be able to drive the ENPS, all we need to do is to ensure that we have a good employee engagement strategy that's going to keep employees engaged, that is going to make sure that employees feel that we're part of this, you know? Okay, so that is one. So these are the things that we can use with an organizations, especially for this training. You know, when you're looking at the impact, you can tell them, by the way, after the training, I'm not able to present a few metrics, and one of the metrics is the NPS. The next metric that we can look at is the employee engagement rate. Yeah, this is whereby we're trying to look at the engagement rate and share how employees feel engaged in their work. When I'm working, when I'm in this organization, am I engaged? And we're told the simplest way to track the engagement rate is to collect feedback during one meeting, stay and exit interviews. And I was challenging some people somewhere and I was telling them, yeah, in most cases, you're very good at conducting exit interviews, HR people. But have you ever thought of conducting a stay interview? Yeah? Stay interviews whereby I'm an employee, I'm not leaving, but you need to know what is happening. Let's not just wait for employees when they're leaving. That's when we conduct these interviews. Let's have a form that can help us determine our stay interview and get to know how satisfied are our employees. And there are a few questions that you can be able to use to ask that. So the first one is that, are you happy at work? And you'll have a rating, like let's say 0 to 5. Have you received sufficient training to perform your role? 0 to 5. People will rate. So at least you're able to get an average. Do you have a good relationship with your colleagues? People will rate. Would you recommend this organization as an employer to others who will rate? Then in case you need to have a mechanism of getting to know what do these people want, maybe you can add there and say, because now this will help you in providing the solution. Because we said we want to produce HR metrics that are going to help us make decisions, that are going to help us drive our HR agenda. So maybe you can ask later, what do you think we can do differently? And you'll be surprised by the things that the employees will bring up. And something that maybe has been really giving you sleepless nights, you find the employees have the solution. So after that, then to work out the average engagement rate across the business, then you're going to work it out wherever you're saying the number of employees above the engagement total number of employees times 100. Then that is going to give you your engagement rate. And just to mention is that after this training is being recorded, so after this, you can always interact with these slides, you can interact with this presentation so that you're able to pick up the HR metric that you'd want to start with. And I would be very, very encouraged. I would really feel very encouraged that if one of you, of people in this training after this, are able to produce this kind of HR metrics and present them in your next management meeting. You're coming to the end of the year. So as you're doing the end of the year report, you're like, wow, we've been able to undertake the employee engagement rate, the NPS, and trust me, people will take you serious, and you're told in terms of engagement, a good average engagement score for an organization is anything of 50% or more. So anything below, then it means there's something that there's a problem, and you need to know, you as a HR, what mitigation factors are you going to put in place, because there's a risk there to ensure that employees continue being engaged. Okay. The next metrics that we want to discuss is employee turnover rate. And we have discussed about it earlier, but how do we calculate it? And what is employee turnover rate? It's a measure that refers to the rate at which employees leave an organization. Yeah. And you calculate it by the number of employees who have left over number of employees times 100. The key to note is when we are calculating the employee turnover rate, I know most of us, we look at the total employees, even the new hires. And that, if you do that, then it gives you the wrong rate. So for example, there's an example here we are saying that let's say our organization had 200 employees in. This is where I am. Yeah? It had 200 employees. It had 200 employees in 2020. Then around the year, you also had 10 new people. So like most people, what they'll do when they're calculating the turnover, they'll look at these 200 plus these two, the 10 new employees. So they use the 210. However, if you want to get the right rate, we are told don't include the 10 new hires because it's going to give a wrong percentage. So you take the total number of employees at that point, the total number of employees who have left, and you get your turnover. And we are told anything that is below 10% is good. And at times you go to the meetings and you're challenged and you're told, by the way, the employee turnover is very high. So how do you defend yourself as a HR person? Since you already have the employee turnover, you're like, no, as it is, the acceptable turnover for employee is 10%. Currently, we are at 6%. We are at 4%, and you're able to put that and prove that with a metric. So that also helps you. So that even as you're being told, HR, you need to do this, you need to put mechanisms in place. I don't know why employees are leaving. It's like our systems are not working. But the moment you say, no, this is our employee turnover rate, trust me, it really adds a lot of value in your presentations. So that's how we calculate our employee turnover rate. And like I said, you can always come back to this presentation because it's been recorded and to be able to interact further. The next metric, and this is how we calculate employee retention rate. How much are you retaining your people? You have a retention strategy and you want to show its impact. Maybe you've sold a retention strategy, it went through, but now how do you show that for real it's adding value to what we said, the overall organization goals? So the way you're going to show that this strategy is working is by giving and presenting HR metrics on your retention rate. And you're saying, by the way, since I implemented the HR strategy on retention, this is how we've been able to retain our staff. And how do we calculate it? We calculate it by looking at the total number of employees and total of number of employees who have left versus over the overall total number of employees. And again, like we said earlier, we should not look at the employees who have left. You have to look at the number. Don't, at times you find people have left, you've hired, so you have to ensure that you get it right. Because if you get it wrong, then you're going to have the wrong retention rate. So ensure you get it right. And why this metric is important, it is an indicator of any company's ability to enable a stable workforce. Because if your retention rate is good, let's say it's 96%, you're able to retain people at 96%, then you're doing so well, then that means you're stable. And whatever strategic direction you have, you can be able to know that in the next 5-6 years, we're going to achieve this, because the people that we have, we are going to invest in them because we are going to retain at least 96%. So even if the 4% will still leave, we're still within our stability in terms of our workforce. Also, it helps to show if it's a bad retention, it means your teams are not well motivated. Someone is saying something? Yes. Anyone who? Yeah, go on. Okay. So it means, allow me to continue, and I hope you can hear me. Hope I'm not talking on my own.
We can hear you.
Kindly somebody confirm. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciated. As I was talking about the employee retention rate, and kindly let's try and mute ourselves so that we reduce the distractions. And with a good employee retention rate that is positive, you're able to increase your employee productivity and engagement, and you're going to address the recruiting issues. The next measure is, thank you, Harriet, for that confirmation. I appreciate. So the next is a training effectiveness. Like I was saying earlier, how effective is our training? When you sponsor people to go for training, do you have a measure that shows the effectiveness of that training? Do you have a measure that shows there's a return on investment? We took you for a 2-week leadership training. How am I able to show as a HR person that for real, after taking you for that training, there's something that we can see, the levels of engagement have increased. The numbers of our satisfaction survey have increased. The numbers of the positive feedback that we're getting from our clients has increased. Yeah. So we need to measure that effectiveness. So how do we do it? One, we can measure it through our post-training quizzes, assignment, one-on-one discussions, surveys, and questionnaires. And you realize that in most training, especially when it's one-on-one, even like this training that we are having, you find that after the training, most people will give some questionnaires and they'll ask, how effective was this training? Did it add value to you? Do you feel it was relevant? Were your expectations met? Is there anything that you've learned? Do you feel like there's value addition for your time, So that is how you measure the training effectiveness. The next metric is on cost of HR per employee. So this refers to the total cost of a company that a company spends on human resource. Yeah. So you may, as an employer, I need to be told, how much does it take to keep Irene in this organization? How long does it take? How much does this cost to have this and this, So how do you do that? So one, you calculate it by putting the total cost of a HR person. And HR this is an employer. So you're putting the whole salary. That is whereby you put the basic, the house allowance, the transport allowance, any allowance that you have, plus the benefits. And the benefits, you're looking at medical. Assume you have medical, you have other benefits, you have the, like what the gentleman told us about the clubs, membership, those things. How much does it cost? You equate, if it's medical, you know how much premium you're paying for me as Irene, then you add the gross salary. Then you divide it by the total number of employees. Then that will give you the total number, or it will give you the cost per employee. This is very, very important. So that at the end of the day, if I'm saying, wow, when I'm telling you, when I'm trying to tell my retention strategy, or I'm trying to tell the management, by the way, you see, this is how much it takes. Maybe you're trying to sell and you're telling them, maybe we need to have compensation and benefits. We need to add something. We need to increase on our benefits. And they say, see, based on this sort of cost of employee, based on the return, maybe the money you're making, we still save. We're still going to make something. Okay. The next metric is in the cost per hire. So this will tell you exactly how much it costs the organization on average to hire a new employee. Yeah. How much is going to cost the organization on average to hire an employee? And how do you calculate it? One, you look at the internal recruiting costs. And I'm sure this is somewhere most of us just take for granted. So what are these internal recruiting costs? So part of the internal recruiting costs will be, maybe in some organization, the HR committee that is recruiting has some allowances. Maybe they're giving sitting allowance. If they're not giving sitting allowances, some people have gone a higher notch and they're like, the people seated there, how much are they being paid per hour? Assume your HR director, if you quit their salary per hour, I stay in an interview for 3 hours. That will be how many other directors are there. So that will be an internal recruiting cost. Then we have, maybe you call there some snacks. Maybe some people will give bus fare to the people who are coming. Maybe you don't have a hire, maybe the person that you're hiring, you have to hire maybe like some projectors because they need to come and do some projections, all those costs that are attributed to that internal recruiting process. Then we have the other, plus you add the external recruiting costs. What are these external? Maybe you advertise for this position in different medias, maybe those on the newspaper, those on the social media. Some of the social medias at times, maybe you need to pay a cost. Maybe you advertise with some recruiting agencies and they also charge you. Then you over the total number of hires. So when you do that, you're able to see the cost per hire. And that's what I was saying. The moment you see the cost per hire, or maybe you see how high it is, then as an organization, you ask yourself, what are we going to do to ensure that we retain people? Because this money, if you're retained, and maybe you realize somebody is just leaving, at times you're told an employee will leave an organization maybe because of 10,000, right? Which is a lot of money. Or others will leave because of a benefit that they're not getting. But maybe they're willing to renegotiate. So if you go to your supervisor and you're telling them, it's going to cost us more to hire this person over a period of time, as opposed to just giving him this extra 5,000. But for you to be able to have that discussion, you need to have some data to support you. Yeah. So I tell people, at times we sound so helpless when you're trying to sell and you're trying to tell them, please, I wish you can just give this guy just that extra 2,000 that he's asking for. And they're like, no, we're going to disorient our scheme. So what are we going to do? But the moment you put on the table, like, this is a cost of hire that is going to cost us. And you find when you do that, in some cases, and in most cases actually, if there's flexibility, because in every budget, even like in our recruitment, we always have a band, you know? So there'll always be that flexibility to be able to sell that agenda. I go to our last two measures. Absenteeism rate. He talked about absenteeism. We cannot ignore it. And I always tell people, the moment you realize your absenteeism rate is going high, there's something wrong. Either people are very demotivated, people are having work burnout, people are just stressed. I know someone who is very close to me, who used to work in an organization, and they were very senior. They were actually they were actually the CEO. They were, whatever organization they were the CEO. And believe it or not, they would check themselves into a hospital. And they would check themselves into a hospital, the tier, I think that's the tier 1, the high cost hospital. They would check themselves in and they just say, I am stressed. I just need 5 days out of the stressful, because if they know I'm in hospital, nobody will bother me, you know? But until you have a metric that tells you, what is happening to our senior management? On average, we seem to be having our rate for the management is like going up and up. The sick leave at a certain level is very high. A certain person, I've worked with people whereby every time either we are going into a meeting, we're going into some deadlines, they would always be sick. They would fake sick days, you know? But how do you tell that if you don't have a way of measuring? So that is a very, very important metrics on absenteeism. Then the cost of HR per employee, I think that I've discussed earlier, whereby we refer the total cost of an employee spends on the HR per employee, and how to calculate it is the total HR cost, which is the salary and any benefits, over the total number of employees. Then you get the HR cost per employee. Cost of HR per employee. So we continue, and here we're going to look at the key performance indicators and their relevance. And I would want to ask, when you're asked about key performance indicator, what comes to your mind? Anyone can answer kindly. Harriet, what would you tell us when you hear of the word or the term key performance indicator? It's a term that most of us use. What is it? Anyone can answer? Harriet, we have Joshua, Sonny. Gadoni, would you want to tell us something?
Let me try.
Yes, please, my dear.
Maybe it's the factors that determine the success rate of something.
The success rate of something, right? Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I wanted to say, our organization, when we reduce its mission into achievable units, so we reduce them to key performance areas. Then in one key performance areas, it is further subdivided into achievable units. Now, it is those achievable units showing how they will be, how the achievement will be measured, that we call key performance indicator.
So how the performance will be measured and the success of whatever you intend Whatever
Yes.
is intended, what is its excess? I mean, what is its success, right? So that is in the indicator. So the indicator will be that end result, right?
Yes, exactly.
Okay, good. So let's see what we have here.
Hello.
Yes, please go ahead. Someone is talking?
Or I can just add or just
Please.
to put an input.
Yes, please go ahead.
Indicators come in many ways. While some are used to look at the monthly progress against a goal, others have a long-term focus. Then the one thing all KPI have in common is that they are all tied in a strategic goal.
They are all aligned to a strategic goal towards that success that you want. And I like what the gentleman said, into achievable units, So whatever it is, it can be short term, long term, but it has been broken down. So we start from the top, the strategic, the operational, the tactical. Then now we have this indicator that will actually show, did I achieve that? So thank you so much for that input. I appreciate. So let's see what we have so that you can see, like I said earlier, we all know. So some of these things, we just have to remind ourselves. Yeah. Like we can see, we have key performance areas and key performance indicators. Yeah. And the key performance areas are primary responsibilities on an individual or core areas. Yeah. So which area is this? A specific area within the organization. Yeah. So there'll be a key performance area. Let's say we want to, on customer care, one of our strategic objective is to improve on the way we are managing our customers. So that is a specific area. So for us to be able to define that performance area, we're going to look at that specific customer and ask ourselves, what can we do to drive this customer satisfaction, maybe index, or what customers are saying about us? And you allow me to use like the banks. Nowadays, in terms of how they serve us as customers, I'm sure, and most of us in this training, if I was to ask each one of us the last time we went to the bank, I'm sure most of us, you can't even remember. Very few. As you went to the bank and you went to the bank, which is your branch. In the past, if your branch is on Kenyatta Avenue, that is where you had to go. But now the banks have come to even where we stay in our estates, they've come to every area. You get, so they've been able to look at us as a customer. How do we manage our customer satisfaction on our staff? Okay. Then now we have the key performance indicator. This is the unit of measure. How do we measure? So this is the area, the customer satisfaction, the customer service. This is the area we want to focus on. But now how do we measure its effectiveness? So there we get a KPI, which will be that specific unit of measure that provides clarity on the performance that needs to be done, and to also provide a framework that will enable me or us as HR, as we're evaluating, to generate the targets, which are core. And this is the core of any performance management system, performance management framework that you'd have in an organization. Yeah. The key performance indicator. If today I come and say I have achieved, so what indicator can I show? What is that unit? I can show and say, yes, I achieved. For HR, like we've said, the metrics that we have, the retention strategy. My KPI was to achieve 60% of, let's say, the retention. We've said anything above 50 is good. Yeah. So that becomes to me as a key performance indicator. So if you don't have an indicator that will show the indicator of this training, like the training that we are having, we need to undergo this training. Me, as the facilitator, as we engage with you people, is that, am I delivering a training? Will I accomplish the content that I promised as we began? That is an indicator. Yes. So let's go into details to be able to understand specifically what is a KPI. Because I know one area that we as HR are challenged on, and especially when we come to disciplinary on staff who are not performing well, is because there's nothing to show. The supervisor will come and say, Marine does not perform. And they'll be like, no, you'll ask them, how do you know they don't perform? Because I give them these reports, they don't make the reports, there's nothing to show. So it is our responsibility as human resource to ensure that all people understand and they have key performance indicators that even when somebody comes and says Irene does not perform, it's because I know Irene is supposed to attend 90%, but they're attending 10%. So we don't even have there's not even argument. And me as Irene, I understand we're supposed to achieve 90%, but I'm only achieving 10% because it has been articulated to me with clarity and I have understood. So let's further go and see what it is all about and how we ensure that we are measuring our performance. One, the KPI, a KPI, most people call them the KPIs. It should provide a way to see if our strategy is working. Like we were told, the people who presented, they said, the people who've given us, we've shared, they talked about the strategic, the organization. So this performance should show if the strategy that we have in place is working. Yeah, it should focus employees' attention on what matters most to success. What is the most important thing? We talked about of data that is relevant. So in this specific area, you'll find like most strategic periods or strategic plans will have the midterm, long-term, and short-term, midterm, and long-term. Are we focusing on the long-term, yet we've not even achieved the short-term? Yet we know these short-terms, the end goal is to achieve the long-term. Allow measurements of accomplishment, not just work that is performed. It has to be a measurement for an accomplishment. I have to achieve this within 5 hours. I have to achieve this within 2 days. I have to achieve this within a specific quarter. I have to achieve this within a year. Yeah, it has to have a measurement. But if you tell me, I really want to be getting those reports, you don't even tell me, do you want the reports monthly? Do you want the reports quarterly? Do you want the reports God knows how? Then the next thing, I'm taking you to HR that, you know what, employee X has not been giving me reports, but you did not measure. You did not tell me, I want you to be giving me a monthly report. And you find when you come, maybe let's say like the disciplinary, it becomes very ugly because if the employee is well informed, they will challenge you. And if you, as a HR person, don't challenge this supervisor before you go to maybe to the next level, you also get embarrassed. Because after that, people will be like, by the way, you guys, why did you have to waste our time calling for us for this disciplinary committee? Or even maybe the person you give them a show cause, they respond and you look at it, you're like, God, sure, really did I have to give this show cause? You feel funny. So, and I tell people, if you have, especially whereby most people want to undertake and to have a good disciplinary process, anyone who comes to you on a performance issue, it's even clear by law. If you're going to discipline me on performance issues, then you have to ensure that there's clarity. But how do we ensure that? It has to have very good measures of performance. Provide a common language for communication. I know, like in most organizations, you find people of the same, they come from the same area, and you find it's like it's not their official language. But do you embrace common language? It does not matter whether we come from the same village. If I'm in the office, let's use the official, acceptable languages. But don't give me instructions in my mother tongue. Because what will happen is maybe how it comes out in mother tongue is very different from the official language. A good performance measure should be communicated in a language that I understand. It has to be defined in terms of the owner, in terms of the unit of measure, collection, frequency, data quality, and expected value of targets and thresholds. I talked about a report. I want this report, a summaries report on all the employees per quarter, well articulated in departments, in sections, every quarter, every month, every year, half year, very well articulated so that even me as an employee, I know what is expected. Are valid to measure measurements of the right things. If you ask to give a staff count report, and you give a staff count report of 20, let's say like for 2021, and you're in 2023, chances are it is not valid. So you have to ensure that it is valid for that specific period that you're looking at. Are verifiable to ensure that data collection is accurate. As you present the measure that you're giving, like the rates that you're giving here, if it's your employment turnover, if somebody has come and went into your HR system, will they be able to pick up the same data? Can you be able to provide evidence on how you've come up with that data? But we know that some people, they give a very good rating, because like I said, the mistakes normally we make, since you want to show how positive you're doing, so you give something that is fake. But when it's audited or somebody now starts coming to check on the data that you have, they realize it's not verifiable. So you have to ensure that it is verifiable and that the data that is collected is accurate. That way, that gives an attribute of a good performance measure. So all these are very good attributes that we can use so that we ensure that our measurements are good and they give us the output that we expect. Because like we said earlier, when it comes to metrics, data in, they say data in is what will go out. So garbage in, then the wrong data will go out. So we have to ensure that we have the great measures. Okay. Further, for us to be able to get positive outcomes, we need to name the measure. Like I said earlier, name this measure. What do you want? I want a percentage. I want a ratio. I want a summary that is summarized maybe in 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. And find the measure. Okay. Begin with the end in mind. Since I know the measure, they want it in percentage. We are measuring our employment percentage rate turnover. It is a rate. We know that is coming with a percentage. So whatever data I am going to generate is data that is going to enable me get a percentage. But if I get data that has no figures, then it becomes very difficult for me to, maybe like I was saying, when you're doing there are those things that we checked earlier, when you're looking at how to pick, you're asking questions and you're saying you rate 0 to 10. Then I know at the end of the day, I can be able to get a percentage. But assume you're asking questions. What do you like about this organization? So one person will say, I love the working environment. I love this. Yet you're supposed to give this data in a percentage. You see, that becomes very difficult because everybody will say what they like. So you can imagine you have a million and one things. So you have to begin with the end in mind. So if you're going to undertake a survey and you want to get a percentage, then ensure you have a way of being able to retrieve that percentage from the data that you're going to get or generate. Be specific. Do you like working for this organization? Rating is from 0 to 5. 1 is the best, 5 is the worst. But you see, if you leave it 0 to 5, you don't say which is the best, which is the worst. What will happen? Some people will put 5 as the best. Some people will put 1 as the best. So at the end of the day, what will happen? This data will be corrupt. And it will not give you the truth picture. Because person who said 1, if in interpretation 1 was the worst, yet another person thought 1 is 1 because it's the best, the end result will not give the true picture. Check the bigger picture. Look at the organization as it is. What is the strategic direction of this organization? Don't just look at this data, at this, just like, have the organization strategic decision in mind. We're looking at the bigger picture. And what is a bigger picture? It is a strategic direction of this organization. Where do you want to see ourselves in 5 years? What can I do as a HR person to ensure that I support this bigger picture to enable us get where we are going in 5 years? Yeah. And as you generate the data, as you're trying to measure our data, what is the best evidence? The data I'm presenting is on the staff headcount. So what would be the best evidence to give? I'm able to show in this department, this is what we have. In this department, this is what we have. And like what the gentleman said, we have, this is the gender that we have, female, male, and like it or not, it's unfortunate, but in some organization, I'm told there are those now they don't put male and female. They'll even put your orientation, you know? And these are the emerging issues that we cannot hide from. Because at the end of the day, these are the people that come to HR. I work in a place or engage in a place whereby they even came, you know, like there we have the union, you have the union and everything. And they say they want to start a group of people with different orientations. So what do you do as a HR person? You cannot ignore them. You have to listen to them. So in case you're giving a report, you'll be asking, what is the evidence that I can say, by the way, I had like 5 people who came to me and this is what they're asking. Yeah. And you're like, no, depending on our culture, depending on our values, then this is a no-go zone. But without evidence, you're not able to provide the support that you can be able to give, or you're not able to help the management make a decision. Because God forbid, in case it's an agenda that you want to make, and the people that are talking about it are maybe like 100, they have, it's 50% of your staff count or 50% of your staff employee. I mean, you cannot ignore it. Let's say maybe they want transport, they want, you know, employees can be very interested in requests at times. You cannot ignore it. But for you, it will help you because it's going to be your evidence. And you can say, this is what I have. This is the memorandum maybe they brought to me. And I'm bringing it to management because I'm seeking your guidance because of this and this and this and this. So always ask yourself, what is the best evidence that I can give to be able to give support to my metrics? Yeah. So what are the standards? Everything has a standards. Even in certain metrics, we have standards. Yeah. So what are the standards? Okay. When we're setting our targets, because you agree with me, targets is everything. And all these performance, the HR metrics that we're going to set, there's an element of targets. So when you're setting a target, whatever target it is, these are the standards that you can embrace. So one of it is that this target must relate to a single output. What is the output? And when we're talking about targets, is because as we're generating metrics, we need to know what we want to achieve, you know? So we cannot avoid this discussion of KPIs and the target setting. It has to relate to a single output. We want to grow our customer base. We want to grow our staff retention rate. Targets must be measurable. We talked about the cost of hire. How do we measure it? This is how we measure it. The target must have deadlines. You cannot give an open target. Like maybe assume you're undertaking a survey because you want to see your staff engagement. You cannot have a survey that runs like forever. Because if it runs forever, then what period are you evaluating? So you have to say, we are running this survey for 2 weeks. After that, we're going to have the report. Targets must be uncomplicated. I always tell my dear people, HR, let's not complicate things. Get targets that are well understandable to every employee, and those which are not complicated. Targets must be accompanied by a comprehensive action plan. How am I going to achieve this? We have this training. So the first question I'll ask myself, what am I going to do to ensure that I achieve this training? Because I know people have expectations. This is what they want to learn. One, we'll ensure that we have the presentations. We've done our research well. So you have to have a comprehensive action plan. The targets must be realistic and attainable, yet challenging. If you have a target that is not challenging, it tends to be boring. So set targets that are realistic, and especially if you're dealing with the millennials, they want challenges, So if you give them targets, they'll be like, Sasa, yeah, even within 2 days I've done, but it also needs to be realistic and attainable. Targets must be under control of the person and the team setting them. I cannot come in HR and from finance and I'm setting a target for you because I don't know how HR operates. Or I'm in HR and I'm telling the sales and marketing team that you know what, you have to grow our client base by 80%. I have no idea of what they're doing. So you have to set targets that you are in control. And that's why you find that we'll have the organization goals, they're cascaded, downwards to achievable units up to the person who's at the lower level. And that's why you find like if you've embraced the balance scorecard in terms of your performance management, you find that everybody, even the person who's offering the cleaning services, has something that they have to contribute to the overall score. If it's on customer service, it's on financial, and they will have a target on it. Yes, and the supervisor has control on them. So you cannot start setting targets for other people. We are trying to focus on the high impact targets because the high impact targets are targets that can turn around everything. Participation in target setting. As we are setting our targets, we need to ensure we have the participation of people who are going to execute them. You cannot sit in the office, you set your targets, you go tell your team, this is your target. And they don't understand. It's not even attainable. It's not even realistic yet that the people who are on the ground. You need to have their participation. You need to discuss. And that's why you'll find like in most organizations, when they go, like, no, we are coming to the end of the year. Most organizations will even take like the senior management, they go and they plan for the next year. So when they plan for the next year, they know the senior management, after that camp, pick their teams, maybe internally call them for a meeting, and they're like, from HR, this is what management expects from us in line with the strategic objectives or the strategic goals that have been outlined for 2024. So what are we going to do? What targets can we put in place? What will be our KPIs? What are we going to show at the end of 2024 that for real we've been able to achieve? And you brainstorm, you come up with realistic objectives, you set smart objectives. But if you just sit on your own, then they'll just say, hizo ni zake. Do not even own it. We talked about ownership. Very, very important. Because at the end of the day, the moment you get this right, then when you come to the point of generating your HR metrics and analysis, you'll be sure that everybody is part of it, everybody understands it. And of course, they have to be systematically reviewed. And that's why you find like most people will have the quarterly meetings, whereby they review their performance targets. They will review, this is how we perform this quarter against what we had set ourselves to perform. People will have monthly meetings and you're like, this is how we are performing. In terms of our recruitment, we had said you're going to be having a recruitment turnaround of 1 week, but now it seems it's even taking. So and you're asking yourself, is 2 weeks realistic? Maybe we have been overambitious. When you look at the advertisement, I know this person, one person is not available, another person is online, some other interview are not available. So is 1 week really realistic? Then we're able to review them and we tell ourselves, I think if we put it for 1 month, then 1 month is realistic. So it's very important to keep on reviewing, of course, in a very objective way and with facts. But that can only be achievable if you have the right supporting analysis. Okay. So identify the key performance indicators in an organization. We've been talking about the KPIs and the targets. And we are told developing a KPI is a straightforward process. I'm sure it's easier said than done. At times when you're told to develop a KPI, it's not as easy as it sounds. When you're told, simply translate KPIs into measurable values. Like I said, the KPIs is the key performance areas. We talked about the customer services. So how can we make it measurable? By putting in place a KPI on the customer satisfaction index. We are told the values may be numerical or qualitative. And I want us to be very, very specific to go into the real setting of KPIs, because I know this is an area that we struggle on. And I want to ask one of us, anybody, if they can give us an example of a KPI. It can be their personal KPI. Yes. Someone is listening to Radio Maisha. Kindly give us an example of a KPI. It's open. Kindly let's engage. Example of a KPI. Yes, go ahead. Someone is talking, just unmute. Unmute yourself and go ahead. Someone is trying to say something, I can't hear you. Anyone who'd want to try? Yes? And like I said, kindly, I think there's someone who is unmuted. I'm trying to check who is that. I'm not able to see. Kindly unmute yourselves. Ezekiel, let me mute you. Ezekiel, please. I'm trying to mute him. I'm unable to mute him. Ezekiel, if you can hear us, kindly, I'm trying to mute you. Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we're talking about the KPIs, and kindly let's just mute ourselves so that we avoid the distractions. Anybody who'd want to give us an example of a KPI? Anyone? Kate, Doreen? Anyone? Harriet?
I can try.
Yvonne? Yes, please, kindly go ahead.
For recruitment, we can say the average time to hire from the time you place an advertisement to the time the employee joins the organization.
So what will be the measure there?
We will check
So you're
the
saying-
average time taken, the TUT for hiring.
Okay, so the TOT for hiring, right? So then this is the time from advertisement to the time they join. Okay. Allow me to interrogate this KPI. Some people, when you're looking, and this will be looking at the recruitment turnaround, right? The recruitment turnaround period. So we can say maybe it's 1 year, maybe let's say 1 month. Most people do 1 month to 2 months. And when you're looking for the recruitment, some people look at it from the advertisement, and some people look at it from the approval, and some people look at it from the last person, the day the person resigned. So as HR professions, if you're told to guide, you're setting a KPI for a new HR who has joined. which point, at what point will you start measuring that KPI? Is it at the point when this person left? Is it at the point when this person made a request to replace? Is it at the point that it was approved? Or is it at the time that it was advertised? Yeah. Question?
If it is in regards to recruitment, then recruitment begins on the day a requisition is filled, and it ends with the last application on the deadline of the day of application. So anything that begins from even moving the envelopes is selection until onboarding. So that is the recruitment selection.
Okay, so the KPI you're going to, I love what you said, thank you. So we have the recruitment and selection. So we'll have two, those are two KPIs, right? So there's one on recruitment and there's one on selection. Are we right?
Yes.
Okay, so now my question, I go back to the KPI that we are having, is the average time to hire. This is from advertisement to joining. So is this a recruitment or selection KPI?
Since hiring involved two, it is for recruitment and selection. It begins with the day a requisition was filled to the day that employee, after the interviews has been done, accepts the appointment and sets foot to the organization, reports to his work or her workstation.
Okay, thank you. So the point I am trying to drive is that I'm sure maybe when you hear about recruitment, you'll be like, how can I set 3 KPIs out of recruitment and selection? But we can see from what we are given, we have a KPI on recruitment and selection. And from this, it was an average hire from advertisement to joining. However, we also have another period from the day the person left, the exit. Okay, assume it's a new, or assume maybe it's a replacement. So the day we got a request to replace to advertisement. So you see that's also another KPI. So if you're looking for the turnaround of the recruitment period, so you can see how you're able to measure those targets. Hope you're together, yeah? We're able to measure those and break them into measurable. We talked about breaking them into measurable units. So you can be able to measure the first unit whereby when this vacancy fell vacant, the line manager raised a requisition to hire. The approval process took like a week. So that is one target. Yes? Then from there, we advertised. This person joined. Earlier, I talked about one of the metrics, an employee stay interview. And on the onboarding, we are saying this person, and this of course now goes to the selection target. When they joined our organization on 1st of June, they left in December. Maybe around November, we've undertaken a stay interview. And from the feedback that they've given us, we can even be able to predict by come December, they will have left. Okay? So the point I'm driving is, the times at HR, I sat with some HR team somewhere, and we're saying it's almost impossible to come up to develop KPIs in HR. I'm told I have to have like 3 KPIs on recruitment. And I don't know, all I know about recruitment is we advertised and the person came. But from this interaction, we've been able to see that from recruitment and selection, you can be able to come up with even like 3 or 4 KPIs. Yeah? Which are very straightforward to the process. And the process we're discussing is recruitment and selection. Okay? They simply translate KPIs, which are the key performance areas, into measurable values. We are talking about the recruitment. That is the area we are talking about. But now we are going deeper and asking ourselves, what is the average turnaround time of hire? What is the time that it takes for this person to be onboarded and to start working and be contented? Then we are told the values may be numerical or qualitative. Average time. We're going to get it either in time, we can get it in days, we can get it in percentages. You know, when we compare, let's say we are saying we had like 5 people, so 10 people were able to have 10% of the people within 2 weeks we had higher. And you find, and I tell most people, if you're doing an average, you realize there's some recruitments that will take like 5 months, but you also have some recruitments or recruitment and selections that will take even a week. Maybe it's an internal, so it's very easy. And that's why it's good to have the average, because it helps you have a bigger picture. Because if you just pick one recruitment and use that to evaluate your performance as a function, then you agree with me, it may not give the correct picture. So now let's be very, very specific. Now we go to a KPI of a HR manager. We are all HR managers. Yes. And I want to, as you interact with this, you also start, maybe now as we go to the next year, you can comfortably set your KPIs and kindly feel free to interrogate, to ask, or maybe to add, because like I said, in adult learning, we learn from each other. So we go to recruitment. So the first key performance indicator is the average lead time to recruit employees. And you can see this KPI, the template that we have, has the key result areas. Those are the areas we're talking about. It's recruitment, it's training, that is general. Then now we go very specific, the KPI. So we start with the recruitment. From there, we have to weight the KPIs. In one of my slides, I spoke about the high impact and the impact the KPI is having. And in case you adapt this, you find some organizations will weight and they'll say the weight of your KPIs have to be equals to 1. Okay. Then, so you put a weight. So like, no, these are 4 key result areas. So you can say under recruitment, I'll put a 1. So what is the weight of this KPI of average lead time to recruit? You put the weight there. What is the target? The target I've been given is this. What is the actual? This is what I achieved and what is the score? So more specifically, we look at the key result areas. Yeah. And the key result areas are the main goals that the HR manager needs to accomplish. In this sample, we have 4 key result areas, and that is recruitment, training and development, performance and career management, employee retention and productivity. We go to the next one. The key performance indicator. This is more of a summary. So as we're coming to an end, now we're trying to summarize, because now as you develop your action plan, now these are the things that you need to ask. How is my KPI? Key performance indicators are measurable indicators used to evaluate your performance level. And we are told every key result area must have at least 1 KPI. Because whatever result area you have, you must have a KPI which is measurable to be able to align. And you agree with me, like, no, these key result areas will be, there's a way it's aligned to the strategic area. Then we are told for effectiveness, the total number of KPIs should be 15 KPIs to achieve. When will they ever achieve them? So let's ensure that the KPIs that we give, at least we have 8 to 10 items. In the weight, you can see, these ones, the one they've adapted is 100%. There are those that will adapt like 1. So you'll find here they'll put 0.1, 0.9, whatever, then their weight becomes 100. So this is whereby you weigh each KPI as defined and is determined on the scale of priority, and where the total weight should be 100. And like you can see from these weights, they've given a lot of weight. The average they've given a lot of weight on the performance score of new and they're performing. Because if somebody comes and then within 6 months they want to leave, what does that tell you? There's a problem somewhere. They also put a higher weight on percentage of employees that participate in career coaching program. Why? Because they know the more employees participate in this program, then the more value is going to have on the organization. So they've looked at the percentage of employees that participate in the coaching program. Then also they've put a high rate on the percentage of employees that leave the organization in a given period. This is another key result area of employee retention and productivity. Because they want to know, why are people leaving? Because you don't want to have more people being retained so that your retention rate is favorable. Then they've also now put a different rate on the training hours per employee, percentage that employees that fully execute the individual development plan, and profit per employee. Okay, so these weights vary. And you find you may go to an organization, especially let's say like maybe this year, your strategic objective, let's say, is on productivity. We've said everything you're going to focus it on productivity. What are you going to do? Or on staff development. You find like there's some organizations like this year is on development, you want to develop. Career development is good, talent management is going to be key. So you find as a HR, you may be given more weights. And you can even find in your KPI, like the recruitment or the training has even like 30%. Yeah. Then the rest have 5, 5, 5, 5, 5, 5. So it depends on the area that you want to give priority in that specific period. Yeah. Then the targets, looking at the targets. So the targets is that you've been told the average lead time to recruit employees is supposed to be 60 calendar days. Those are 2 months. And you're saying, as per our definition of recruitment on this, is we are looking at the point that it was advertised, right? When the applications came and that whole process, it should take 60 days. Then we are saying if it's performance score of a new employee within 6 months, within 80, the average score is supposed to be 80%. Okay, the training hours per employee per year is supposed to be 40 hours per year. When you look at your training schedule, does it provide that each employee has 40 hours on training? That's a question you need to ask yourself. Yeah. If this is your indicator. In terms of productivity, they are saying, whereby the key performance indicator is difference in the rate of productivity before and after training is supposed to be 50%. Like I said earlier, if you're undertaking a training, and I gave a very good example of customer care, have a survey before and after. And as per this HR manager, they've been told after every training, we're supposed to see an improvement in productivity, has to be at 50%, and of course, above. Okay. Let's go on. Then now, from there, we are asking ourselves, what is the actual? Now, when we come to the evaluation, that is where we ask ourselves, what is the actual performance? And one of the challenges that we face as HR people is having the relevant tools to measure. Like now, we want to measure, what do we pick that we've not Now we've spoken about recruitment. We are learning, and this is going to help us as we set our KPIs. Training hours per employee per hour. Okay. We want to measure on performance, career, and career management. We want to measure the percentage of employees that fully execute the individual development plan. So what tool can we have in place to enable us measure that? A question to the participants. What tool can we put in place to measure number 3? Number 3, the first KPI, percentage of employees that fully execute the individual development plan. Over to you. Kindly unmute yourself. Tell us, what tool can we have in place? Yes, please. I'm waiting for someone to tell us something. Yes, please. Anyone who would want to try? Anyone? Or do I mention? There's someone I've been mentioning. Gathoni, Sonny Gathoni, tell us something. Or Harriet? Harriet, there's also Ansanet. Hope you're together in this training. Kindly somebody tell us what, or maybe if that is complicated, you can pick any key performance indicator and ask yourself, you're trying to take your HR officers through this and you expect them to be able to measure their performance. Because like we said, as you present this, thanks Harriet for that assurance. Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate. Is that as you're generating the HR analysis and metrics, you need to have evidence. So what evidence are we going to have in place to ensure that this employee, when they say, I have 90% executed my individual development plan, what supporting documents will we have? What evidence will we ask from the supervisors? Because this, I feel, is a KPI that may be shared with most of the supervisors. Kindly, I'm waiting for someone to say something. And remember, there's no wrong answer. All answers I said are correct. Yes, please.
No, Mwalimu, cases might be different because
Yes.
for us, we normally have a corporate approved training plan.
Yes.
So once it is approved, then as HR in learning and development, we simply follow whether those trainings were attended or not by the provision of certificates when you are doing accounting. But of course, we normally have a training impact assessment, which usually is filled by the supervisor just to assess whether the gap that was identified before the training still exists now that the training has been done, or the gap ceases to exist, and what accomplishment has the staff achieved since the training. So they can tell us that since the staff came back, the department or the section has been able to achieve A, B, C, D. And then from that, we do that, the assessment was done. Also, individual development plans may involve even the courses we are attending right now, where I'll have to, in order to be in a good standing with the IHRM, they will require a number of points of the CPD, which I will present using that certification and inform the organization. So I don't know specifically the tool, but that is the approach I may use. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've answered it very, very well. Because one, you've told us provision of a certificate. We talked about evidence. That is evidence. So in case I'm interrogating your individual development plan, which has been picked, I'm trying to imagine if you have a training schedule, like you said. So from the training schedule, I know this is my gap. Maybe I need to go on training, let's say on emotional intelligence. So it is on my individual plan.
Okay.
So for me, I'm evaluating. Yes, Ezekiel, you don't say something? Okay. So if I want to confirm that for real you've gotten the 90%, I'm going to look at that certificate that you attended. For the emotional intelligence, I'll have it. Of course, having the certificate is an indication that you actually went for that training. Second, there's something we've talked about, a training impact assessment. That is a tool. Because a tool is not, it's anything that will help you. Because now that assessment form, the supervisor will fill it and say, employee X had issues with his or her emotional intelligence. But after this training, I've even put intentional pressure to just see how they are going to behave, and I can confirm that they have actually improved. Okay. Then the individual development plan that is in place, you're able to tick. Maybe like I was supposed to do this. I know we talked about the CPD, right? All of us as HR professions, we expected to renew our certificates annually. And one of the ways that will enable us to renew is by getting the relevant CPDs. So by me having a renewed HR certificate, I have a certificate of CPDs I'm able to show. So even as I'm talking about 90%, I will have evidence that actually shows that this has taken place. So you've answered it very well, and that is what I was looking for. Because at times people come to us and they're like, so how do I know that they've actually done it? But we do it, but we don't know we are doing it. Okay. So when you look at the percentage of employees that participated in a career coaching program, again, I go to the submission is you have a training program, and in that program, I believe there'll be some coaching sessions. Okay. So from those coaching sessions, I'll be the coach, and we know coaching is at different levels. So maybe I need to undertake executive coaching whereby I'm coaching the senior people. There's this middle level coaching and this other level coaching. So even though who is driving that agenda under the training and development, I will show in the first quarter, I was able to coach 5 senior managers. I was able to coach this, and I can show there is a attendance list that shows these people actually attended. Some organizations have like a coaching booklet whereby after our coaching sessions, we're going to write down what we discuss, the areas that require improvement. Maybe I'll even give you an assignment like next time, do this, and this is what we'll be evaluating. So you see, I can easily look at that booklet and say, wow, this is what has been happening. And I, as the HR manager, will be able to show it to my supervisor that this is the coaching that I've been able to undertake, and this is for employees. So and so, this is from this person, and you're able to show that. Percentage of employees that leave the organization in a given period, we have the exit interviews. I'll be able to show these are the exit interviews. These are the certificate of service that we've been able to issue. These are we've gotten these resignations, and that helps you to give. Those will be the supporting and the evidence that you'll be required. So that as you're giving this percentage, as you're getting your actual, and you find in most cases, maybe your actual will be more. There are those that will find the actual is more or less. So your performance is based on the target. And remember, we said for you to set these targets, you've done a lot of participation, you've done a lot of consultations. If I, as a HR manager, I've been given this as my targets by my supervisor, I am supposed to cascade this to the senior HROs who are reporting to me, so that it is cascaded. And when I'm cascading it to them, we sit down and we agree. And I'm telling them this is a percentage that we have. Okay? Like no, in some organizations, based on the structure, you find they have a department on training and development. That is all they do. They have a department fully on recruitment. and there'll be a specific person. They have specialized HR people, but there's some organization, you're a generalist. So you do all of them. So when you come to the weighting, it will be different, because if I'm a journalist, then I have to be weighted in all this. But if all I do, I'm an employee, training and development, then the weighting on training and development will be high. Yeah. And that will form the basis of my evaluation. So why I'm putting more emphasis on this KPI table is because if we get it right, we are the ambassadors of KPIs in organizations. When a new person is coming, even senior people, we are always called upon to come and guide the management on how we're going to develop the KPIs. So if we don't get it right for ourselves, then that tells you we're going to have challenges even as we're trying to support the business. So it's very important for us to understand our KPIs and how we evaluate them and how we tabulate them. So I want to request, is anybody who has a question in reference to this KPI? Anyone would want any clarification? Any clarity, any input on this KPI table for a HR manager? Okay. Thank you. My assumption is that we really appreciate it and we get to understand. And this, in case there's anyone in this training who is not very clear about their KPIs, you can copy and paste and try and make it suit your organization. And as you help the other people set the organizations, and like you can see, when talking about metrics, look at all these KPIs. There's a metric that you can be able to produce. And since we are talking about a HR data-driven culture, that is what we want to embrace, because we want to change the way we are doing our reports. That is just notes and write-ups and write-ups. We want to give reports that are driven. When you look at the first key result area on recruitment, you can be able at the end of the month, at the end of the quarter, you're going to give a report that says our average turnaround in HR is this. Is 50 days. Yeah? You get where we're coming from? So that everything that you're doing is all about data. Because if you don't start from the beginning, then the end becomes a problem. Because if your KPI is not set in a data-driven format, then you come to the end of the year and you need to develop a report, you'll have a problem, because now you'll have to go back and start generating those reports. But if you get it right from your KPIs in the beginning, it becomes very easy. Because like you can see from all these key performance indicators, there is a metric, there is an analysis, there's a report that we can be able to produce. The first one, we can be able to give our turnaround average time, 60 days, 2 days, 5 days. We can be able to show an analysis. The first quarter, we are at 40. The second quarter, we are at 50. The second quarter, that quarter, the last quarter. Maybe the last quarter, you see most people, depending how your calendar is, there are most people who recruit in December who want people to start working in January. So you find in December, the average, since there were so many recruitments, tends to be very positive. You're able to justify the performance score of new employees. You can be able to pride and say and tell people, you see, since we implemented the online bonding process, we are able to improve our performance score from 60 to 80%. Training, you've sold your budget for training, it has gone through. But what analysis, what metrics do you stand with in that board meeting, in that management meeting? You're telling people, yes, at the beginning of the year, I'd said that I'm going to have 40 hours per year per employee. And you can see from my training, I'm able to achieve this. You start talking in figures, because HR, we talk so much with theory, and there's another school of thought that says, and to you, if you have those supervisors who just say that, they're like, HR, you talk too much. Give us figures, give us numbers, give us percentages. So here we are now. We have the right way. We have the metrics that can put us on that table, and you talk about numbers, you talk about percentages. You're saying, we can see the difference between the rate of productivity before and after training. And you're talking about percentages, they look at you and they're like, wow, they even, they start appreciating the impact that you're having on the organization. If you're talking about performance and career management, everyone is talking about talent management, you're able to tell them, yeah, 90% of the employees were able to fully execute the individual development plan. And this is the evidence that I have for that. 95% of the employees participated in the career coaching program. You're able to present it with a metric. You're able to present it with an analysis. And you're able to say, out of the 90%, 50% were senior management, 50% were middle level management. And since we're working on this upcoming leaders, 20% were on this level. And you're able to give a breakdown, and people really appreciate your reports. When you go to the retention, you're saying 80%, only 2% of the employees left. And we have seen from our presentation interaction, worldwide, 10% is acceptable retention percentage. So imagine when you get 2%, you're doing so well. So even when people say, I'm like, you HR people are just leaving, what is happening? People are leaving, and you tell them, no, by the way, we are still doing so well because we are 2%. Last year we had 4%. The other year we had 6%. Yeah. And the acceptable is 10%. So we are doing so well, So you can imagine if you're 2% and the acceptable is 10%. And you're telling people, you see, and they're able to see, wow, I think HR is doing something, And next time we go and present a budget, they're like, yeah, last time they really reduced our retention rate has gone so well. So it's what we need to do. Profit per employee. You tell them at the end of the day, this is the profit that we got. This is the impact of this employee towards that profit. So these are the metrics that we can be able to embrace so that we ensure that we add value to the system and we align them to the business goals. Because when you come to the business goals, and you agree with me, they always produce their reports with percentages, with numbers. So it is a high time that we HR people started embracing a HR data-driven culture. So with that, I come to the end of my presentation, and the next 20 minutes is meant for question and answer, and any comments or any clarification that you'd want. If there's an area that you feel you want us to maybe have a look at it, then I'll be more than willing to do that. So I open it up for question, answers, comments are open. Just unmute yourself and contribute accordingly. Yes, kindly, someone say something. Thank you, Harriet. Thank you. You're contented, and thank you so much. I appreciate. Anyone else would want to contribute?
Yeah, I wanted to contribute to the last slide that you have presented. It gives a better picture of perhaps what needs to be done. You find that there are a lot of key performance areas that we concentrate on, but ultimately it looks like we should be asking fewer, bigger questions, like maybe turnaround time with not just our recruitment, but also the turnaround time in delivering service. But I wanted to some bit of guidance when it comes to targets. The ones that you have written 60 calendar days, 80, 40 hours per year, 50%. So somehow at the back of our mind, there should be some notes somewhere that support this. I don't know whether this is agreed upon at the strategic level, those who have developed the strategic plan, and when they are developing that strategic matrix, or the best practice and the sources where we borrow. At times we say that, okay, up until 10% we are good in staff turnover, but then when we want to quote where the 10% is coming from, it needs some sort of documentation. Things like staff, what is it called? Establishment. Of course, we know that comes from the treasury. Areas like that composition, staff composition, whether we are more female, more male, more PWDs, more whatever, that is also given in law. So there are those that are expressly given in law, but there are those that can be disputed. So at the level of target, for us to be authoritative, where we draw them, like HR sources that are there, maybe if there is a lead, I can appreciate.
Thank you very much. I'll attempt to respond. And your question is that the targets that I've indicated here, one is to say that this is more of just an example. And you agree with me that each organization is unique and different variables will apply to different organizations at specific times. So like the targets, where you draw them from is from your strategic or organizational goals. We talked about the goals. If it's in the government, I know every period or every year, there's something that you want to achieve. Like I know most people like now currently in the government, there's a bottom-up approach. So there's some strategic paper that has been done. And so everything that is being done in the ministry has to be aligned to that. So that is what drives. And that's why I say every organization will be unique. Secondly, some organizations have adapted the balance scorecard. So if you've adapted a balance scorecard, allow me to use that as an example. And it has 4 attributes. So there's a finance, customer, and I think there is systems, then there's learning and development, right? So if your emphasis for this period, let's say like for 2024, it is on learning and development, and all this is supposed to be, if it's a balanced scorecard, it's supposed to be 100%, right? So maybe training and development, you've given, since this is a focus we have for 2024, we'll give it even 40%. Then the rest are allocated differently. So what will happen that year, everybody's main focus will be on learning and development. So whether you're in HR, wherever you are, that will be the focus. And since you're borrowing from the organization objective, they will have given a target. And they'll say, within this year, because we want to implement our learning and development, we have to ensure that all staff are trained. Every staff has to have like 80 or 90 hours per year. So that is where you draw it. So this target is not a target that you will sit and come back with. It's a target that is drawn from the organization goal. It's also drawn from what has been working. Because if as an organization, and like now the other day I visited, I think it's University of Nairobi, and they have a customer service charter. And on recruitment, I think they've said the recruitment, I'm not sure, but allow me to ask, I can't remember how many months. I think they've given like 2 months. That is what the charter says. So if the charter says 6 months, 60 days, then for me as a HR, I have no option. I'll have to put my 6, that will be the target. But now you realize, maybe with time, I don't even achieve the 60. I'm always at 80, 100. Then you realize over like 2 years, we've never been able to manage the 60. So what does that mean? What that will mean is, and there's justification as to why I'm getting the 80. It will mean when we set the target of 60 in our service charter, maybe some variables have changed. We talked about reviewing. So we'll go back as an organization and say, as much as our service charter says we have 60 days, calendar days for recruitment and selections, it's not working. From the data that we have, because of the parameters, you agree some organizations are very bureaucratic. I don't know who has to sign. I don't know, it goes to who, it goes to who, it goes to who. So something takes like 2 weeks before it's signed. So we ask ourselves and saying 60 is not realistic. So can we go to, from this period, we've realized I think 80 is the more realistic and is a target that is attainable. Remember, we talked about the setting KPIs that are smart. Yeah. So we're saying 60 is not smart. As much as it's specific, it's measurable, it's not realistic, and it's not attainable. So what are we going to do? We revise this to 80. So now I'll be told as the HR, the charter has been revised to 80. So my target is 80 calendar days. So actual, maybe some I'll get 80. Of course, there are those that maybe I'll even get 40. So that is how we draw our target. So there's no standard target. The target is unique to the organization because it's supposed to be aligned to the organization goals. I hope I have responded, and I hope I have answered well.
Okay,
Kindly
thank
just
you.
confirm.
Yeah, I
Okay,
confirm.
appreciate. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Okay, somebody is asking, what is a major difference between KPI, OKR? What is OKR? KPI, OKR. OKR is organization key results. Okay, so there is key performance indicator, organization key results, key result parameters, and metrics. If I get you right, my own interpretation, and I stand to be guided, and I think we're interacting, we also learn, is that when you look at the principles of performance management, we look at key result areas and key performance indicators. And when I look at the organization key result area, for me, I'm looking at it as the KRA, organization key results, is a key result area. Because see, we are looking at this organization, which area are we putting our emphasis on? It can be recruitment, it can be customer service, it can be marketing, it can be our growth, our profit percentage. So for me, I'm looking at it, I think it's just the terminologies that have been interchanged, and the metrics we're talking about are the ones that we're discussing now. So like now, the metrics on recruitment, the metric that we'll be able to produce will be the recruitment turnaround, because metrics is the end result. So you can be able to produce a metric from anything. Whatever result area, organizational key result that you're looking at, you develop a metric on that. If it is on customer service, develop a metric which have parameters, and the parameters we're saying are our customers satisfied. What are the complaints that we are getting? And we're saying the metric on that, because that is a customer service parameter that the result area that we've picked on, the parameters on customer complaints, most complaints are, it takes too much time before you respond to my concern. If it's a bank, before you process my check, you guys have said it takes 3 processing days, but it's taking like 5 days. When I come to the bank, the turnaround, when I pick the ticketing system, it doesn't seem to work. Because I pick this system, but when I pick, maybe somebody else's, it's being called, yes, my number has not been called, it has not been called up. So those are the parameters. So you define the parameters and the metrics that are going to assist you in providing an analysis or giving like the end result. It's like you're cooking. This is the menu you want to cook. So this is the food. Then now you serve. So the metrics and the analysis will be the end result. Because now that shows, yes, from the 100 customers that we got, 10 have complained, 10 are happy, 10 can come back, 5, they say they will not ever come back again. And then the question we'll ask ourselves, why do they want to come back again? What do we do to win them back? Okay, so Ezekiel, that is what I would respond on that. But I'm open to anyone else who has a different view on that explanation.
By the Mwalimu, your explanation is okay, even when I look at the parameters. I just wanted to maybe expound a bit, add also my thinking that
Please do.
metrics, strictly speaking, is anything that can be measured. You can measure my height, you can measure my BMI, you can measure the time, you can measure. Now, parameters now are what contribute to those measurements. Maybe, and there is also one thing maybe that he may have left out, like analytics. Now revolves around, therefore, if my BMI is indicating that I am towards obese, then what do I do? So I start playing around with parameters like perhaps I start to exercise twice a day, perhaps I reduce the level of calorie intake and such stuff. Otherwise, organizational key results and key result areas are just the same as you have explained. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. I appreciate that input. And I love that very good summary. Metrics is anything that can be measured. Yeah. And allow me to read the charts. Thank you so much for the wonderful sentiments. And someone is asking about the notes. Yes. Like I said, as we began, this is being recorded. So you can always go back to the website of ACHRP and you'll be able to get the notes. They're there. The presentations are there. Even the recordings in case there's an area that maybe, when you're online, something comes and interrupts you. Maybe there's an area that you missed. You can always go back and you can be able to listen the whole training, and you'll be well equipped. Okay, so any other question? I'm looking at yes, we are going, like I said, we are going to share the notes. And not ideally sharing, but you go to the website, the CHRP, you have the login and the password, you're going to go in and you'll find them there and you can look at them, you can listen to the trainings that it was ongoing. Yes, we are together. Thank you. Thank you so much, Harriet. Yeah. Also about the notes, you can always go back to the website and you'll be able to go through this and even other trainings, not just this, even other trainings, because now you are a member. Okay, thank you so much for the wonderful sentiment. Yes, it will be shared. Thank you. Thank you. I love the good sentiments. I appreciate. Okay. So with that, anybody else that would want to add anything?
You'll have to explain how to get the notes. And what happens with our IHRM now that we have attended the 6 units, lessons, the admin issues, maybe as you close? Do we go to IHRM? Will they update our portal automatically? What happens?
Dan is Dan with us? Okay. What happens is, after this training, I'm sure you've been given the logins. So you go to the ACHRP website. Once you log in, you're able to download a certificate. So you're going to download the certificate, and that certificate has the CPD points. And that is what you're going to attach as you're going to give it to HRM as a support, as evidence, like you're talking about the case, as evidence that for already you've gotten the 6 CPD points as required. However, when you go to the website and you have any challenge, there's always a number there that you can be able to interact with, that you can be able to call. There's also an email you can be able to email. Then they're going to be able to get the customer care is going to be able to give you the feedback or give you the information that you request. So just go to the website and all the information is there, including the certificate for this training And for these, there were 6, the webinars, there were 6 of them, you'll be able to get a certificate there. And for the notes, that is the same place you're going to get. So when you go to the website, there's a place where it talks about the trainings and the trainings that you want to access. So you just click on that, and the YouTube will upload and can be able to follow. So it's very easy. But in case you have a challenge, there's a number that you can always call that is on the website. Hope that is clear.
Yes, it's clear. I'm heading to the website and I want to try it. Thank you.
Okay, fine. Most welcome. I really appreciate, and I really, really appreciate your input and really sharing good examples. We learn from each other what organizations are doing. And it is my prayer. Yes, Asane, thank you so much for the kind compliment. And it is my prayer that from this training, next time now you go, you'll be having matrices, you'll be having analysis, you'll have a HR data-driven working environment. And trust me, it works magic. It's very interesting. Yeah, so I wish you all the very best. And in case there's no any other question, allow me to wish you the very best and wish you God's blessings and a wonderful weekend. And once again, I really, really do appreciate your time. I appreciate your interrogation and our interaction. I appreciate your input. I appreciate following me and being very, very cooperative. Thank you very much. And let's continue engaging. Let's be on the lookout on the upcoming trainings so that we can continue building on the areas that we need to build ourselves, and even reminding ourselves on some of these areas that maybe we've not interacted in a long time. So otherwise, thank you. And I say bye-bye. Santi